options are to look at bar charts, and this gives you a good indication of presence absence during the whole year. And this is the best way to look at, sort of frequencies. So this is great, but it's even better to kind of go into detail. So you can go back and look at line graphs. I'm going to type in 3 species here. I'm going to go blackpoll warbler. I'm going to add yellow rump warbler. And we'll go with northern cardinal. And I'm going to change the region here, change location. We're going to go with Nova Scotia, entire region. All right. So when you're looking at the data, so this is a frequency. What the frequency is the percent checklist that have the species on it, right? So you can see that for northern cardinal, it's pretty consistent year-round. A little spike during the Great Backyard Bird Count. There's more checklists are entered from backyards, and then obviously the peaks for migration, right? So yellow rumps and blackpolls. So you see a big peak in the fall for blackpolls, not so much in the spring, and because that here's just the local birds, whereas this is birds from all the way from Alaska, and yellow rump warblers we have quite a large local population, and etc. So then you can go to abundance, right? Birds per hour. Average count. So you can see average count of yellow rump warblers in the fall. This is 28, 27, 26, 27. And high count, you can plot it. So the highest count ever for Nova Scotia for yellow rumps is about 2,000. That was starting on October 1st. A big flight probably. That could be from Seal Island or something. And total number of birds reported. So, but for me, I think the best one to look at is frequency. So this is really where you want to look at things, and I think as we have more checklists enter, and this is really where you the birders entering checklists helps us understand where what is going on, what are the actual true occurrences of species in Nova Scotia, right? And the more checklists you get, the better the data become. So this is a really an encouragement to this is great stuff, and that would have taken someone a long time to collect all these observations and make some graphs like this, and this is just handy for everyone to access. So what are we going to talk about? Maybe we'll let's skip over targets and listing tools, and let's go right into the review. What do you think? Sounds good. Yeah. So these are the data that you can that are present. And so then we looked at that data quality, right? So there are issues. So the biggest way to get over data quality is through the review panel. So each region has reviewers, and they review any odd records. So right now, this is what the review queue looks like. So in Nova Scotia, it's myself, Jake, and Dave Bell were the reviewers. Blake Maybank was the reviewer. And Blake was the original reviewer, and then me and Jake came on, and then Dave Bell came on. And our job is to look at every record that is a rare observation, which trips the filters, and I'll explain what a filter is in just a second, and to judge its validity. So a lot of times it's just simple things that are unusual in winter but are well known. So you can see lark sparrow, Mike McDonald. He's had that bird now since October at his house, right? So his comments are continuing bird, and that's perfectly fine documentation for a known rarity. So in this case, and he's also had this chipping sparrow at his house. Alex D'Entremont has had this Baltimore owl at his house for all winter, right? So I know all these records are good. I've seen plenty of photos. The observers are well experienced. So I hit valid, reason, species known to be at location, right? And so that's how it goes. And I just click change, and now they are valid and they are visible in the public output. So it's as simple as that, right? And so here you have some high counts. So here the black scored 250. Mark Dennis reports 200 from back row. Now 250 is a pretty high count, but back row is a great location, and there are sometimes big movements of black scoters there in flocks in the winter. And so in this case, for a black scoter, I'm going to say probably observer experienced or record not exceptional. I have the choice. And it's not essentially, it doesn't really matter, but it's just saying you have confidence that the birder critically identified the birds, counted them correctly, or not exceptional that, sometimes you have a filter, but really that record is kind of plausible there. So I'll just go with observer experience in the case of Mark Dennis, and we'll change that, right? So you can see that a lot of this is sort of regular run-of-the-mill stuff, right? Here, Buffalo had 91. This observer included a picture, which is great, but 91 on the French Basin Trail, I would guess that it's probably set at like 85 birds, and if you put more than 85, then it just prompts you to explain. So in this case, I could select the option valid, documentation photo, right? So what makes a good documentation? Obviously, describing the bird. If it's a rare, if it's something unusual, just, how you saw it, where you saw it is great, and that's great for other people trying to come to it. But for trying to evaluate a sighting, the actual description of the bird is the most important thing, right? And it can be general. You want to always go like, relative to what? So, size slightly smaller than a robin, bigger than a towhee. It was song sparrow size. It was similar to the song sparrows I saw, except for that it had more fine streaking on the breast, or things like that help give some sense of what the bird was, and not just I'm sure of my idea. I looked at my field guide, because that doesn't impart any information on the actual bird, right? So here we have one, Terry, here in the room here. You have 12,000 starlings, right? So that trips it, because we can set it at 10,000, right? You can put up to 10,000 starlings, right? So places like, in Wolfville at the rendering plant, you can get up to 10,000 starlings, right?
I thought I was being conservative that day too.
Yeah. So this is important. If you have high counts like this, it's good to. If you're tripping the filter because you're counting, it's give an idea of how you counted them. Say, counting in hundreds approximate, or because a lot of times, in fact, most of the times, there's just an entry error. You want to put 1,200, and you put an extra 0. That happens all the time. So it really is important to. I shouldn't say all the time. People are very good, but it does happen, right? So you're going to get up to, you're going to get some high counts there, right? So there we go. So this is how it's reviewed. Is there anything you want to add? How it looks.
I don't know. Do you guys have any questions about it right now?
Yeah, this is probably new.
You said you'd say something about the filter.
Okay,
Oh yeah.
Let's go right into the filters then. I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm going to go. So this case, this is asking this chipping sparrow record. Why is it in my review queue? Well, we'll go check the filter. So I have a filter for Shelburne County. I'm going to go to, but I've set it at you can report 0 chipping sparrows from January 1st and April 15th without having to fill out extra details. Okay, and that's simply because they're pretty unusual in the winter. They're regularly occurring, but chipping sparrows infamous for being misidentified.
Tree sparrows.
Yeah,
But beginners, we don't. Yeah.
So it's
beginners putting in
10 chipping sparrows. Yeah. Right, so it's simply just to keep better control of the data. So what are filters? Well, we have one for each county, and it is basically a set up a checklist of what you can put in without having to be prompted for more details. So I'm going to go through the Halifax County filter. So you were saying something good about how they were set up originally.
Yeah, well, originally, reviewers went through. I was a reviewer in Mississippi when I lived there, and they had essentially the filter was horrible. They didn't even have any coastal birds in Mississippi recognized. So all coastal birds were flagged, and there was no reviewer at the time. So none of them made it into the database. Like no one was reviewing them. So I volunteered myself to do it and got hooked on it. And so then I had to make the filters, and at that time it was just an Excel spreadsheet, and it was month by month. At that time, you just pick the amount for each month that you thought would be reasonable for that area, and I split up the state into 5 different regions based on counties, and just did it all that way. It took forever. It was really hard. And then I can't remember what year it was, probably around 2010, 2011. They went and they made the filters from the actual data from like states and provinces. And they actually used the data from surrounding areas too, because like some areas didn't have enough data. Like at the time, Nova Scotia probably didn't have enough data in there to really get accurate filters. And they went in and they just basically made this automatically, and they made it like specific dates, date by date, and they just like put in the numbers randomly. It was pretty good for the most part, but there were some issues with it. Like there was, at least in Mississippi where I was at the time, I mean, have all these birds on the other side of the Mississippi River in Louisiana, where it's really flat and don't really make it into Mississippi, and they all made it onto our filters. So there was a lot of cleanup to do. But so we cleaned it all up, and initially it was just state by state. Then you can just break it into counties. So we just broke it up into counties for Nova Scotia this fall. Had a separate list for each one, because counties are kind of different in their bird life. So it didn't make sense to be accepting Virginia rails from other counties other than Cumberland.
Right. So we have a filter for each county, and that requires us to look through them and to judge each thing. So they're not perfect, right? And there's always room for improvement. And in fact, I encouraged a lot of people, through personal emails to help us out with the filters. I know particularly Cape Breton. I don't have a lot of experience birding Cape Breton. Dave McCorkadale does, and he offered some good suggestions and easily implemented them, right? So this is for Halifax, and it's fairly good, but I can use some improvement. And the point is to keep these filters kind of up to date, and we don't want to be too conservative, but we don't want to be too liberal, right? Because otherwise, one Merlin misidentified is not a big deal, but 10 blue-winged teals all winter misidentified, that ends up really causing problems, right? So you do have to try to find the right balance, and it's not always easy. I'll give you that. So we can see, you can scroll down. We have options for subspecies, we have options for SPA, so greater lesser SPA. Obviously, we encourage conservators to report the full number. So this is for Halifax. So I just noticed something. I could probably take Brant off this filter completely, and every Brant record for Halifax would have to be reviewed. It's probably a good idea. I'll do that some other time. And then there was yellow crowned night heron on this filter. I realized, so I took that off completely, and I got Tony and Angie. They had a nice photo of a yellow crowned night heron. They put it in their checklist, and it was already viewable in the public output, but it hadn't been reviewed. So I just reviewed it yesterday. And another woman, I'm not sure, she had a nice adult yellow crowned night heron. Like I said, it's a work in progress, and it requires, a lot of times we look at the bar charts in eBird and use the data to then set the filter, right? And so that may seem like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense, but there are so many records that generally you pick up trends and you just kind of cut off the end dates and the max dates, and you make them a little conservative. So reports before May 15th for certain, spring arriving birds, you make them being reviewed, even though it's expected that on May 13th you're still going to have a blackpoll warbler, but you set the filter at May 15th, right? So that's what it is. So I think this is probably new to most people. Maybe some of the other stuff is well known, but the review process and the filters was only known to eBird reviewers. And so this is really what we're looking at, right? So I can change the numbers, I can set ranges, I can redneck grebes, I'm going to move it from 8, you can I can move them around, right? So
we can see this but can't change it. We have to.
No, you can't see any of this. So this is all only reviewers, right?
Okay.
And so I know Pictou County, right? The waterfowl situation there is much different than the rest of Nova Scotia. And we used to have just one filter for Nova Scotia, and pretty much every day Ken would be out birding, and he'd have to put in not unusual for this location. So we've updated the Pictou County filter, and hopefully it's better, right? But we're doing this because this is clear what's happening. Ken's out there all the time birding, and it's great, and that's exactly what you need, right? And so it's more fine-tuned, and it helps. Now you can't report a Bicknell thrush from every county in Nova Scotia, but we didn't want to have it. Originally, we just had Nova Scotia filter. You didn't want to take Bicknell thrush off of it because they do breed in Nova Scotia, of course, but only in Cape Breton and formerly on some offshore islands. Historic records then a lot of times trip the filter. Brown-headed cowbirds used to be quite abundant in the valley back in the 70s, and Larry and Wayne Neely, I had to review lots of brown-headed cowbird records, but that's fine, right? It's easier to set the filters for now and recognize changes in past. Purple martins, right? I took them off all the filters now, but there's a lot of more historical records that are probably valid, and a lot of people don't have details for them, and it's only because they weren't so unusual back then, right? And it didn't require any details. A purple martin was, essentially not rare. Now it's rare, and you remember every purple martin sighting you have, but that's just part of it, and I try not to invalidate any of those. But there's cases where people don't have IDs and they personally don't want it to be shown up. So there's a lot of give and take there. But yeah, pardon me. Yeah. So So let's get back to, I think that's probably good. I won't save this because I just screwed with the redneck
Yeah.
breed.
So how do I know if a record has been rejected? Say on an owl survey route, I record 20 barred owls, and you say, oh my goodness, that's too many, and you reject it. Do you contact
Yes.
me? Do I know?
I feel we're very good at emailing people about all records. I know there's the occasional one, but sometimes, I'll email people and there'll be, it's errors, sometimes it's errors, but like I said, like our mandate from, Cornell is always email everybody about record if you're going to invalidate it, right? Get details. Do not just invalidate without any reason. There's some cases where, in other places where, there are people that are known to like make up records. That's happened, like, and they just invalidate them. But in this case, no, there shouldn't be any records that just get invalidated. There may be some, when me and Jake became the reviewers, there were, 2,500 review records in the queue, and so that took a lot of time. And to get up to speed, it's possible I skipped over someone's record and I invalidated. But I validated very few. There was one that was it Larry Neely. He said in the comments specifically that he didn't have any more details for it, and so I invalidated it. And then I let him know, like Jake let him know later, and he was quite all right with that. And I talked to him personally and said, look, I'm looking through your records. Is it okay? If you have, he specifically said, I don't have any more details to contribute to this record. This is all I have. It's just a note in my notebook, right? So if you say you don't have any more details, I'm not going to harp you about these details. But if there's nothing there, yeah, I'll email you. And some people,
A lot of times we never hear back. From
yeah,
anyone.
that's true,
No
and
record.
that's fine.
So those ones are
Just-
tricky. I
yeah.
don't know what to do with them, but
Yeah,
if there
sometimes they
really
sit
no
in the
details there, then
Yeah,
yeah.
they sometimes sit in the review queue for a while until we finally, get at them, right? Because sometimes they're not easy, right? And they require a lot of knowledge. For instance, the red wing, I've never seen a red wing and I didn't know anything about red wing subspecies, right? So in this case, I'm not going to go invalidate or validate the subspecies. I'm going to wait until I find out more, right? And ask people that know about red wing subspecies. So,
So if you see a bird and you're not sure, like I thought I saw a vesper sparrow, but it could have been a song sparrow with a big white eye ring, how do I record it and should I put a photo in it to make not too much?
well, if you think it's a vesper sparrow, you put it in as a vesper sparrow, right? And we'll with the photo, right? I mean, it's.
Your description.
Me and Jake and Dave, we volunteer for this, and we're like, that's part of it. Is like, evaluating these records, and obviously it makes it way easier if people have photos, but it's not essential. And I mean, obviously, if a lot of it is still trust. I mean, you see Mark Dennis, observer experience, 250 black scoters or however many there were, and that's it. That's all, right? So it's never perfect, and that's birding, right? But it does prevent egregious errors like, I don't know. Something like,
They put him out in bluebird and Portuguese coat?
Right. Well, so that's another thing. That's not that's
Or
a
I got that example.
no, but that was just a simple entry error, and that we have that option to say observer error, and it happens a lot sometimes. Just wrong location, wrong time of year. People bulk uploading records from their spreadsheets. Sometimes it gets the wrong date, but that's generally easy to come across. And if you guys see any errors in the data, please email us. No, seriously. I mean, if you're out there and you see a pelagic cardinal, clearly misplotted, that's important to know, right? There was a problem. There was
a cardinal coming aboard a fishing boat.
right.
Off Seal Island.
So there are pelagic cardinals out there, but there are not 200 pelagic cardinals for which state was it? One state had real, problems. Yeah, they were clearly misplotting. So, right. So this is the review. So the filter, right? Essentially, and they can use some work. So let's get back to our PowerPoint. Let's look at some of the science. We're getting. All right, so Jake, you want to
Yeah,
take it
so
away?
eBird's been around since 2002 now, when it was first launched. Had a bit of a slow start in the first 5 years, somewhat limited. It was a good idea to get everyone's observations, but they really made some good changes. I think in 2009 they added a lot of those View and Explore data tools that are on there now. And actually, sad to say, but the top 100 is probably what actually made eBird take off. It's like when they introduced that and got the competitive nature of birders going, all of a sudden submissions just skyrocketed, at least in North America. And it's probably, I think it has the most hits of any other part of the website, is the top 100, believe it or not. But